to the Conscience of Kansas radio show with Paul A. Ibbetson, a no-nonsense conservative talk show that looks at the local, state, and national issues that affect the people of Kansas. And now, here's Paul A. Ibbetson.
Ladies and gentlemen, Christopher Horner is the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming and Environmentalism. He is a senior fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, an acknowledged expert on global warming legislation and regulation, and has testified before Senate committees and given numerous addresses in the European Parliament. Horner was included in Greenpeace's A Guide to Climate Criminals, distributed at the new UN climate meeting in Montreal in December of 2005. We're here to talk about his new book, Red Hot Lies, How Global Warming Alarmists Use Threats, Fraud, and Deception to Keep You Misinformed. And Christopher Horner would like to welcome you to the Conscience of Kansas radio program.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, you know, it's our pleasure to have you on the program, and I've been all over this new book, Red Hot Lies. It's so interesting. Could you tell our Conscience of Kansas listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into writing these global warming books?
11 years ago, I was innocently practicing law with a Texas-based law firm. Obviously had a strong energy practice, and one of the clients asked me to be director of federal government relations. It was essentially a no-interview job offer, and I left at the opportunity, and at my firm's urging, that's what law firms do, to become director of FGR for Enron. And on my first or second day on the job, this is in the spring of 1997, I was told that my number one priority was to get a global warming treaty and to get the U.S. involved. Within about 2 months, the Senate was to unanimously instruct the Clinton-Gore administration to not do that. I had left by then, because I found myself on day 1 or 2 sitting in for Ken Lay at a meeting of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy Future that changes its name every now and then.
Okay.
And it's got, on my left was Union of Concerned Scientists. I had just met with Natural Resources Defense Council in the Enron offices. And on my right was the American Gas Association and BP, Niagara Mohawk Power, and others, what we call rent seekers, companies that have discovered the world's second oldest profession of making your fortune off of policy favors from government.
Mm.
And they were trying to find a way to get a treaty that had a rationing scheme that you could swap ration coupons, kind of like what is in place now in Europe. Anyway, I sent an email, Houston, we have a problem. Do you have any idea what this group's up to that you're chairing? And they said, son, I guess we didn't adequately explain our business lines to you. We just cobbled together on the cheap the world's largest windmill company, world's largest solar panel company, world's largest gas pipeline network outside of Gazprom, and we're going to be rich, rich, rich. 2 of those 3 don't make any money without mandate subsidies and taxes to pay for them, and all of them will do quite well in the event we get this regime in place. So that's the story of how I ended up in this. I left the company and have been working on the other side since, and I wasn't a lawyer with the company, so all of this is on the up and up. But the Politically Incorrect Guide came about as a result of this overwhelming noise machine and very well-funded campaign. I mean, remember, GE has Enron's windmills and some of their gas pipelines. They're now very responsible and very concerned about global warming. Warren Buffett has some of the gas pipe. BP has the solar panels, and of course, you've heard from them on this issue too.
Mm-hmm.
They're putting their mouth where their money is, to put it bluntly. So, the pig book came out, and that set off the noise machine against me. And I had some interesting things happening, and Greenpeace was stealing my trash, and I had so apparently George Soros funded camera following me around, and they left their emailed instructions behind one day about do not leave these lying around, and anyway, keep your camera on Horner. There might be some incidents that break out. He's the guy we've been filming, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
This was when I was testifying out in Oregon on their global warming schemes. So I mentioned this in Vienna at a meeting of scientists from around the world 2 summers ago. And they all said, oh, that's nothing. Listen to me. I had Tom Siegelstad, a professor at the University of Oslo, tell me about the wheels falling off his car after he started speaking out, and then they fell off again. And both times his mechanic said the lugs had been loosened, and once his young daughter was in the car.
Wow.
Timothy Ball, Canada's first PhD climatologist, receives death threats, and several others reported professional threats, essentially, nice career path you got here, be a shame if something happened to it. I understand you're rocking the boat and messing with our gravy train here. And so I started digging, and I got this book is about the outrages, as you know. This book is about the tactics, the extent, the nastiness, and the sheer desperation engaged in by people who must avoid dissent. They must avoid what for centuries has been known as science. They must avoid open debate and discussion. And I'll close by saying they're now increasingly open about how they must avoid democracy. I cite numerous officials, and in fact, I served on a panel 3 weeks ago with a former oil company CEO who now is, how do we say, making his conscience feel better. I don't know. This is what he's doing. Who say that the public, which to you and me means the voters, are getting in the way, he said. And if we oppose President Obama's global warming plans, though we're not quite sure what they are, we have a pretty good idea now, it will be, quote, paralyzing and, quote, suffocating. Now, for 8 years, you and I both know dissent is patriotic. No more. Dissent is not to be tolerated. I'm told, and I quote individuals in the book, this issue is too important to be left to democracy. We need to, just for this issue, it's energy, economy, sovereignty, but just for this issue, set aside such arcane notions as democracy and individual liberties and economic freedoms, and agree to cede certain decision-making authority to a supranational organization. We have that already made. It's called the UN and the UN IPCC, or it's got various acronyms, the Framework Convention on Climate Change as well. And to have them tell us what we need to do, because, again, the public is getting in the way. Now, all of this is just too much for people like me, and fortunately for an awful lot of Americans, I believe the silent majority, who have heard drip, drip, drip about these things, but now that we've put it all together, have the opportunity to figure out what's confronting you and what's coming in, I'm fairly confident, the next 12 months or less.
Yeah, well, excellent. And, you know, I've been all over this book, and I have a lot of praises for it. First, this book is written in a very straightforward manner. It's made for regular, everyday people to read and understand. It's not full of a bunch of esoteric nuances and overly cryptic jargon. And that's important because it's important that the American people see what's going on. What first jumped out at me, and to tell you a little bit about myself, Christopher, I'm a former Kansas chief of police. I'm a former member of the Drug Task Force, and I used to actually go through people's trashes, drug dealers, terrorists, and people of that nature. And for folks in Radio Land, this is a miserable job. You have to actually be very motivated to go through someone's garbage, and that's why we call it garbage. So I was amazed that Greenpeace and these groups would take it upon themselves to go through this grueling task to try to attack you. That caught me off guard a little bit, but is in line with the attacks that go on with people that want to challenge global warming. The other thing I thought was very interesting is you do a lot of backing up what you say in this book. You give a lot of instances of other people that have had to go through this. It seems as though if you're going to question man-made global warming and the Al Gore scenario that's being laid out there, that you're put into a position of being what you call the climate criminal. Again, that's another criminal justice term, and I don't know whether or not that is simply to squelch people or if that are fruits of things to come with this expanding power the government is given. What do you see as far as the future if these green initiatives take place, if conservative consent or just free-thinking common sense is squelched? Where will be the end result of these green initiatives that Gore and others want to bring forward?
Well, I'll tell you, just last week, there's a left-wing magazine in the United Kingdom called Spiked Online. They're intellectually honest left-wingers, and I admire their work. I quote a lot of his book because they abhor this issue for reasons that should catch everyone's attention. They see what's coming, and they don't appreciate the infantilization of the masses, treating everyone like infants and trying to scare them into accepting a fairly totalitarian